Forget BBC telly hit Blue Planet 2, which features whales this weekend. Paul said while remembering his experience of a lifetime. Nowadays, the Earth seems to be completely conquered by Homo sapiens. While we still get least opportunities to interact with our friendly neighbors in the deep blue sea, this is a great chance to know one of the white beauties from underwater closely. We'll take you on a journey of Paul, who thought it would be just another day of his vacations, but something unusual was waiting for him that was about to fill his ordinary-looking day with not just one but a bundle of best memories. If you are a lover of wildlife and big sea creatures amaze you, then this is for your interest, as the video of the incident we are about to tell you is on the way while you go through this article. Not just that, we've got an add-on video for you to know more about their fan following. You don't teach respect for nature when you lock it up and treat it like a glorified lava lamp. A famous saying among wildlife admirers these days is taken seriously in Churchill. It's a small town in northern Manitoba, Canada, on the west coast of Hudson Bay. Also known as the polar bear capital of the world, it earned fame in the last few decades for its journeys close to the white bears and snorkeling with the beluga whales. It's a home to various migratory birds. People who don't want to pass the opportunity of seeing these tundra creatures in their natural environment visit Churchill from around the globe. Not to miss on the northern lights or aurora borealis, another best part of the city which is a must-watch during nights. What else could be better than spending nights in an igloo with various colors in the sky? While we are just imagining it, Paul had his plans set for action, including hiking, kayaking and much more. Paul English lives in Glasgow, Scotland. The young guy works as a freelance journalist and broadcaster. He is a nature enthusiast and plans to spend his vacations always in the places filled with scenic beauty. Leisure comes later for Paul. So, Canada was sure on his list, as the country is famous for its wildlife, widespread woods, and enormous lakes. A trip to Canada and everything was exactly as he thought of it. He already had enough memories, but staying in Manitoba, Churchill was about to give him unexplainable moments. Paul English was on his kayaking trip when he heard of a tour guide who could meet whales. And that's exactly what he was there for. Being a tourist, even he wanted to see the huge aquatic creatures. But meeting them, that was a whole different thing. Paul says in an interview, "As I kayaked, a tour guide at Lazy Bear Expeditions, in the tiny industrial town famed as the country's polar bear capital, told me to sing and make high-pitched sounds to attract the whales as we kayaked in the Churchill River." So, now there was a reason behind kayaking. Previously, Paul was doing it just to have fun like other tourists. Now he was excited about meeting the great whales family. However, that idea itself is scary. The whales are not man-eaters, but they're too big for humans. Yes, whales won't harm you intentionally, but their huge size and numbers may bring you into trouble. Was it safe for Paul to think on tour guide's advice seriously? Kayaks are small and narrow watercraft which moves across the water with the use of a double-bladed paddle. Thinking of which makes us wonder how tiny a man on his kayak looks when he'll face one of the biggest mammals on Earth. The tour guide warned him. They said the whales were inquisitive. They warned they might get close to the kayak. Hence, what was in Paul's mind even we don't know. Was he about to get on his kayak? And was he actually thinking to sing to the sea? Even after the warnings. Besides all the facts, Paul decided to hit the sea. He wasn't going to miss an opportunity like that for sure. Just having one thought in his mind: if these marine mammals were waiting for him underneath. Though he just had his GoPro camera strapped around his head, which was enough to film the next moments. Paul wasn't alone on his kayaking journey. He was accompanied by one of his friends on another kayak nearby. But were the two of them just enough to face what may come next? They didn't know the answer to it. All they knew was they both were expecting something unusual to happen for that day. But for that, they were supposed to follow the next part of the advice, which was to sing aloud in the open sea to lure the whales to get closer. And there he was, kayaking in Manitoba on the warm waters of the Churchill River waves, propelling away from the shore. Paul was aware of the possible consequences, not completely though, as what was about to happen was going to leave him mesmerized, not just for that very moment, but every time he'll think of it for the rest of his life. Paul was so sure that an exciting event was on his way, and he was the director of his own film, so he wanted to make the best out of it. Remembering the making of his very nature series, Paul joked, "With my GoPro strapped to my head, whooping around on the sea, I was filming my very own nature series, Blue Planet. Unlike David Attenborough, I don't have had Radiohead and Hans Zimmer soundtracking my underwater adventure." Paul laughingly explains that all he had was his own voice to tempt these marine beauties. The only question was whether it's going to work when the famous naturalist David used different singers' soundtracks underwater to invite the whales to the singing party. Paul started singing aloud a funny song that he just made up, especially for the beluga whales. And the lyrics go like this: ooh ooh beluga oh ah beluga. You can hear him singing in the video soon. He was least assured of the kiddish sounds he was making will grab even the miniature fish's attention. Maybe he'll just end up singing alone in the sea. If that happens, then it'll be nothing extraordinary. Let rip with Arcade Fire's Wake Up. The Gap Band's Oops Upside Your Head and Deacon Blues the believers in lyrics that were more whale-themed. However, he was in luck that day and soon Paul had company. They saw a pod of the beluga whales nearby and all he wanted was to bring them closer, so he continued singing the theme songs. The white whales were close enough that Paul and his friend could hear their noises, which meant that the trick was working and the tour guide on whose advice Paul was singing aloud was right. Weren't they afraid that if the whales come too close they may turn their kayaks the other way around, or what if the whales hit Paul just to stop his bad singing? Man-eating whales? Do they really exist? Recently there have been such stories, and especially about one of the most friendly creatures that are dolphins. So, what was about to happen next was going to cause any harm to Paul? Now that's a concern. The belugas were getting closer, and now is the right time for us to know that they are very sociable and friendly sea animal. Let us also tell you that whales are known to live deep in the oceans out of the reach of humans for most of their lives. Although there have been incidents of people getting hurt, that's not by the whales or dolphins. The trainer died of drowning in the tank. Also, in the history known to humans, no human was ever eaten, nor even the parts of any human eaten by whales. Popularly known as the beluga whales are one of the biggest attractions of Churchill. The belugas are also called the sea canaries, for their strangely clicking, chirping and the high pitch of their whistles lures tourists to the endless subarctic shores. Even Paul was hoping to get a glimpse of these white majesty at least once in his life. However, fate had bigger plans for him. In the past, many times sailors understood beluga whales to be mermaids for one very common reason, i.e., blubber to protect themselves against the freezing waters. The blubbers make visible tracks along their belly, both sides, to store the extra fat. But their heads are free of fats, so it ends up giving them a look of the chubby body and little moving head, unlike other whales whose head stays still with their bodies. They can amuse one with their facial expressions, which help in detailed communication between these social mammals. They definitely are an odd one-out sea creature with their distinctive features. After the snow breaks in summer where the Churchill River pours into the Hudson Bay, more than 57,000 beluga whales gather up there to breed, give birth and spend their summers after staying deep under the snow for whole winters. Making the coastline of Hudson Bay the largest population of beluga whales, you can now understand that Churchill is a second home to them, and they're used to humans trying to get close to them and yet have never hurt anyone. Definitely, they're not smallest in numbers but are surely not the biggest when it comes to size. An adult beluga whale only reach 13 feet in length, which also makes them considerably smallest in their family. The majestic Delphinapterus lucas, means dolphins without a wing, are one and only species with this tremendous white color and the childlike sounds they are fond of making underwater, which the key source of their communications. The best thing about them is they love to communicate with humans as well. On one condition, that humans don't get scared away, which is the least possible thing ever. The facts we just introduced you with would have made it very clear that Paul wasn't in any danger at all. Rather, he was about to face was the mermaids look-alike. Knowing this made my unforgettable encounter with these wild, curious animals in their natural environment all the more powerful. Paul was trying to get the pod of beluga whales near to his kayak. In case the whales come near to him, the best part would be to meet these smart and cute white creatures in their natural habitat. Don't take the term wild as harmful. Wild is a natural state. Well, Paul wasn't the only one trying to seek the attention of the beluga whales. Even the beluga whales are famous for their self-centered yet happy attitude. They don't get scared of getting close to humans because of their inquisitive nature. They are curious to know their surroundings and tend to show sweet gestures, turning their heads sideways, tweeting like birds, mimicking sounds, a smile-like look. By the way, this is the famous best man beluga who attended a wedding recently, and the image was viral and led to many memes around. I once had the misfortune to see belugas in captivity in Valencia, and many are taken from the subarctic and held in tanks in aquariums around the world. Paul is from one of those people who could feel the pain of wild animals trapped in tanks and zoos in the name of human awareness. He knew that if the beluga whales allow him to be a part of their group just for a few moments, how much it'll mean to him. To meet the wild in their natural habitat. And there it started. It started with a bump under his kayak, and when he looked around, it was a beluga under his kayak whom he finally lured from his singing and tuning. The beluga popped up again, this time from the other side of the kayak, repeating the old gesture of sliding along the kayak. While Paul was getting back into his senses after this huge shock of happiness, this was just a start of the beluga adventure. It didn't take much time for others to accompany, and more than one appeared soon after. They were all around his kayak while his friend looked at the whole scene from a distance. At last, that's the moment Paul was singing for, the white whales. And there was more to happen from the visitor side now. The belugas were not just showing off from the river, they were now willing to participate. He could hear them chirping underwater here. Paul continued singing, and the beluga whales continued to follow his kayak any direction it moved. His friend clicked his picture while was being followed by the whales. The beluga whales were enjoying Paul's music, having fun, partying on their own. So, how long you think this following everywhere thing would have lasted? But no one told me I'd be chased around the sea by playful beluga whales off the coast of Churchill, in the Canadian province of Manitoba, for the best part of an hour. Yes, you read it right, for over an hour the adorable musical white whales were following Paul in the sea. But there's more to the story. After all, Paul was confident to make the most of this moment. But Paul wasn't done with this moment yet, and he had much more of adventure running through his veins. He decided to take a step ahead, as if singing to the whales wasn't already enough. Nothing matters, if what he had in mind works. And when everything is going outstanding so far, what's the harm in being a naturalist and come up with an awesome video of a professional kind? Paul decided to put on his dry suit and dive in. As we told you before, the water of Churchill River is freezing cold, and he just had his dry suit on. Yes, he wanted to be a part of the underwater party now, and nothing could stop him from taking his share of fun. When his new friends were popping all over the surface, why should he feel left out, right? And as the plan was moving forward, Paul was underwater now and looking for his friends again. He was willing to get to know these creatures in their most natural way and be a part of their life for a few moments. Honestly, that's all he thought he wanted to do only at that point in time. He tied himself with the boat using a rope and went in. After the previous encounter of the beluga whales chasing Paul for over an hour, he was sure that something more will happen than he could expect, just like the last time. This time also he was accompanied by his friend, though Paul was the only one to go underwater, just like he was the only one to sing before. Again, the advice was to sing. This time, the flaming lips hit, "Do you realize?" drew the ghostly figures close. Paul explained how he never forgot the precious advice. With high hopes, Paul started singing underwater, different songs with modified lyrics in his own style, which he previously discovered as whale-themed song, and his new friends were back to give him company. However, this time they had more to support Paul and continue their friendly terms. But judging by the whales' response, they were keen to help provide their own music, too. Paul recalls when he started hearing sounds from the whales' side as well. They were whistling and were staggering an array of sounds. What more could anyone need from one's trip than a bunch of newly made friends that live underwater? The beluga whales are an example of God's gracefulness, that he made these mermaid-like friendly creatures who are always going happily to get along with humans and are harmless to us in all the ways. The video of the incident is on the next slide. Before that, you should check out this video to know them better. And even if nobody's getting a record deal from the experience, my days singing with the belugas are days I'll never forget. Obviously, Paul had an experience that very rarely people have. Mostly, people see the beluga whales in tanks, learn from their trainers, while Paul met them and had a fun time with them. Here's the video that went viral all over the internet, and people just loved the way Paul brought up his experience. After this everlasting moment, Paul something to say. They're also still legally hunted in some communities. That's the worst truth, we don't remember or think of. As if our global warming isn't enough for their decreasing numbers, that they are even hunted for the sake of tradition. Their increasingly falling numbers made the environmentalists come together and discuss measures to save the white whales, as well as the old traditions that are close to hearts of many communities. Well, we hope for this and every other whale species to grow so that more of us can have experiences like Paul. Wouldn't that be a fun encounter of a lifetime?